And we're live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. We have got a lot to go over today. There's what's being called a major severe weather outbreak that you can see showing up as this tornado watch here in Arkansas, Louisiana, working into Mississippi and Alabama. That's going to be the main thing we're focusing on today. But there's also some other warnings you see on this map. We've got that flash flood warning up there in Missouri. We'll take a look at that. The red flag warning, which means there's a threat for wildfire down here in southern Texas, and then a blizzard warning up there in northern Texas. Very weird to see a blizzard warning and a wildfire warning in the same state. So we'll look at some of the reasons why that duality is happening. And then on the far left of the screen, you can see that winter storm watch and advisory popping up for Northern California because there's actually another storm on the way. So we'll also be taking a look at that towards the end of the video. So if you're only interested in maybe California or the blizzard or the wildfire or the tornado and severe weather threat, then you can go down into the comments below where I put the timestamps for the different stories we're going to be talking about, and you can just click directly to the region you're interested in. But the first thing I want to dive in here is what I believe is the most important part of this forecast today, and it's the severe weather that's building into Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and even some parts of Tennessee, where there is the risk for some extreme winds, some hail, and unfortunately even some tornadoes. And we'll be taking a look at the exact probabilities of that in a second, but first I just want to show the wide view of what this storm looks like as it goes through. So it's all part of this low pressure system. This actually came in after Winter Storm Xylea that we were talking about this last Friday, and it almost absorbed some of the energy from Xylea, and now you can see it rapidly intensifying directly over Oklahoma and Texas. Right, there's that snowfall building into Texas, but what we're interested in is this strip of severe weather and thunderstorms that's going to be first moving into Arkansas and Louisiana, and then you can see it's just going to spread out throughout the entire southeast, working its way especially through Mississippi and Alabama throughout the entire day today and working into tonight. Now eventually that severe weather pushes off into Georgia and South Carolina, but there's so much already to talk about today. I think we're going to be saving that part of the forecast for tomorrow. What we're focusing on is just where the threats are right now. So just seeing that another way, there's Winter Storm Xylea up there, the one that brought over 2 to 3 feet of snow over this last weekend. Part of that energy is being absorbed into this little low pressure system that you see directly over Texas. And what you'll notice is it starts to organize and strengthen. Right here, it's looking kind of weak. The isobars aren't all that close together. But as it moves farther over Texas and Oklahoma, that's where it starts to pull in some warm air and moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and really start to tighten and strengthen. You can see how much closer those isobars are getting, and they get even closer as they move farther into the southeast. So that is what's causing all of this severe weather that we're going to be talking about throughout the day today. It's that cut-off low pressure system that's rapidly intensifying and moving across the region. I usually don't like to use words like rapidly intensifying or major threat or any of those kind of words, but it's looking like today's forecast is like one of the few days a year where the Storm Prediction Center issues a severe threat for severe weather. So this is one of the big severe weather days of the year. So I think it's acceptable to use terms like rapidly intensifying and major threat. So seeing it another way, this is showing the vorticity. You could just think of this as storm energy. And what you're going to see is at first there's actually a pretty decent amount of storm energy directly over New Mexico. That explains some of the fire danger that we had yesterday. There was extreme fire danger through New Mexico and Texas here yesterday. Sorry I couldn't put together a forecast. I was working on some of the research I'm doing, which is actually into wildfire as well. But that is now moving directly over Texas and Oklahoma. Right there you can see that energy. That's what's going to be causing the extreme winds with that blizzard warning. But what we're interested in is as it moves into Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi. That's where you see all that energy start to move into the southeast, and it almost looks like it eases up there for a second, early Thursday morning, and then as we get into the afternoon hours and this evening, you notice that some of that energy starts to pick back up again as that cutoff low moves across the region. So this might be the most important graphic that I show throughout this entire video. This shows the threats for severe weather. You can see there's the marginal risk, basically covering all of the southeast, even working up into the Midwest. And then we have the slight risk in that yellow color right there. But what we're really concerned about is that moderate to high risk of severe weather that you see over Louisiana, working into Arkansas, almost all of Mississippi in that, and then Alabama as well. And I think Mississippi and Alabama look to be the key spots here where we're getting that severe weather threat. If you don't know what that means, basically means that's where we're expecting some severe thunderstorms. That's where there could be hail, extreme winds, and possibly even tornadoes. So we can actually look at the threat for tornadoes as well. If we click right there, that shows what the tornado threat is. You can see there's a 15% chance of tornadoes stretching through Arkansas down to Louisiana and then working into Alabama, where there's that 30% chance is stretching into the very corner of Arkansas and Louisiana, all of central Mississippi, and then into Alabama as well. The key bullseye on this map, where we're the most worried about tornadoes, is right between central Mississippi and central Alabama here, where there's the Storm Prediction Center is giving it a 45% chance of tornado formation throughout the day today. And then when it comes to winds, that's another part of this severe weather threat. You can see it's in a very similar region. It's this bullseye right here. Eastern Arkansas, northeastern Louisiana, almost all of Mississippi, all of Alabama, within that extreme wind category. And we'll look at the winds throughout this video. And then when it comes to hail, you can see it's basically in the same region again. That hail threat right there. And some of the hail that should be forming is rather large, as you'll see when I show a graphic in a second that shows what kind of hail we're predicting. So right there again, you can see that tornado threat through Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi. It's actually somewhat surprising that there's not more of a tornado watch directly over central Mississippi and Alabama. I'll stay tuned throughout the day today. Perhaps they're waiting to issue that one. I'm not exactly sure why there wouldn't be a tornado watch where there's the highest probability of tornadoes. So this, especially if you're watching this video later, be sure to check National Weather Service to get the most recent updates on where all these warnings are. So let's first dive into some of the forecast offices to see what they're saying around this region. So this is a forecast office in that eastern part of Arkansas where we have that tornado watch, and that's the radar right now. You can see some of this severe weather starting, especially that band of severe weather that we've seen is just going to move across the region. So that's what it looks like right now, and this is really it certainly doesn't look calm, but this is kind of the calm before the storm. The majority of the severe weather will be happening into this afternoon and into tonight. So looking at the severe weather outlook here in Arkansas, you can see the eastern part of the state is considered moderate. And it's a little confusing because at first the word moderate doesn't, it sounds like, oh, it's just moderate severe weather. But moderate is only issued a few times a year, especially during the month of March. And you can see on this scale that moderate is actually a level 4. The only thing higher than that is this high that you see down here in Mississippi. So even though moderate seems like it's not all that bad, that's number 4 out of 5 on the intensity scale. And right here, this is the graphic I really wanted to show. This shows maximum hail size up to baseball sized, maximum wind speeds 80 plus miles per hour, and tornado potential is high. So I think, again, that might be another one of those graphics that you might want to just pause the video and make sure you really take this in. That basically sums up what we're talking about today. Large hail, extreme winds, and a high tornado potential. And then if we click over, this is one little notch over in the weather forecast. So we're looking more at northern Mississippi because that's the key spot we're looking at. That's where we're in that high category for severe weather outlook. And then here again, you can see the threat levels. Wind is about high to extreme. Hail is high to extreme. Tornado looks to be, again, in that high category. And then flooding is in the more enhanced to slight risk category. So again, throughout this region, the main concerns are hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes. And they usually put a timing on this as well, but I'm not seeing the exact timing. But we'll be able to see that throughout this video. To sum up, it's basically this afternoon into tonight. So when thinking about tornadoes, what's causing this severe weather? Well, there's a couple things. One, it's what we were looking at earlier with how this low pressure system is just rapidly intensifying. It goes from what looks like your average trough to what looks like a very strong cutoff low. That's one reason that this is looking like a major severe weather threat. The other reason has to do with what happens when you get a low intensifying like that. So as this low is moving across the region, the stronger it gets, the faster the winds are going to be around it. As you can see, those strong winds right where we have that blizzard warning in Texas. Well, on the other side of that low, because it's spinning counterclockwise, you can see on the left side, that's what's bringing down that cold air and causing that blizzard threat and some of that snowfall in northern Texas. But on the right side, it's doing the exact opposite. Instead of bringing down cold air, it's pushing in warm air. And not only warm air, it's pushing in moist air as well. And that's the reason there's this tornado threat. Well, I guess there's a lot of reasons, because weather is one of those things where there's always numerous factors involved. But that's, I would say, the biggest reason. It's this strong low pressure system that's bringing in this warm, moist air. Because when a tornado forms, it's because that warm, moist air is getting sucked up into a severe thunderstorm. So in order for that to happen, you have to have the warm, moist air, which you can see this low is pulling into this region. You can actually see it based on the colors here, where you have this orange color into Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, directly where we have some of that severe weather threat. That is where we're bringing in that warm air, and then that's going to continue throughout the day today. So even into tonight, those winds you see are still pulling that warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico over Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Now, seeing this another way, that was showing the temperatures. So you can see how it's pushing in that warm air. And then warm air rises. That's part of the reason it rises up into a tornado. The other thing it's doing is bringing in the moisture. So where we have that brown color, that's where it's very dry air. So that's what's bringing that dry air down into southern Texas, where we have that wildfire threat. On the other side of this low, it's bringing in that moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. And you can actually see that moisture flowing into this region. So just to sum up, it's the combination of this moisture being pulled into this low and the warm air that's being pulled into this low that is creating this wildfire or this tornado threat. It's also creating a wildfire threat, but that's to be talked about later in this video. So just taking the wide view again, there's the low pressure system as it strengthens. You see that band of severe weather and thunderstorms that's stretching out along the cold front here, and then that's just going to spread out throughout the entire region. As you saw, it was rather widespread how much of that warm air and moisture was being pulled in over all of these states in the southeast. That's going to continue throughout the day today, and then eventually move off into Georgia and South Carolina tonight and into Thursday, and then all the way into Friday as well. So just taking a closer look at the supercell composite. This is a new map that I'm showing because we are officially getting into severe weather season. So this shows this shows what's going on right about now and then into this afternoon, you can see the supercell composite spreading out directly over the same regions we saw that risk for severe weather in southeast Arkansas, northeast Louisiana, but then especially over Mississippi and Alabama, and especially over the central parts of Mississippi and Alabama. Remember, that's where we had the 45% chance of tornado formation throughout the day today. And then as we continue to click through the day Wednesday, you're going to see the supercell composite continue over the same region. And one of the key things I notice is it seems to be over Mississippi for almost the entire day. Other states like Louisiana and Arkansas seem to get in the clear by late tonight, but even into the overnight hours, Mississippi and Alabama still appear to be in that direct area where we're expecting some thunderstorms. So another part of this that we were talking about is the extreme winds. And there is a caveat, I think caveat's the right word to use there, to say about these winds. So this is showing some extreme winds. That's going to be associated with some of those severe thunderstorms that we're just looking at. Whether it's in Louisiana or into Mississippi, you see these little bullseyes where we have 35 to 55, even 60 mile per hour wind gusts at some times. So the caveat here is, while over the region, it looks like there's, for the most part, 20 to 25 mile per hour wind gusts, and then there's these key areas where we have the 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. That is just for the overall little supercell that's moving right there. In the case of an actual tornado, that's where the wind gusts are rapidly rotating in one direct spot. So that's where, even though this map says 40 mile per hour wind gusts or 55 mile per hour wind gusts, around a tornado, that's where your wind gusts can get up to 80, even 100, and then even well above 100 in some cases. And that's what makes tornadoes such a serious threat when it comes to weather. So you can see that those extreme winds are going to be spreading across the region as the storm itself spreads across the region. So I think there's a few states to really key in and look at when we're going to be getting these severe thunderstorms. So looks like about 10 a.m. on Wednesday, we are already seeing them in Arkansas. And then the key spots to look at here are especially on the southern and southeastern parts of the state, because that's where we're seeing the highest risk throughout the day today. So getting into 11 a.m., into 12 p.m., and then into 1 p.m., you see these severe thunderstorms start to move up almost into even northeastern Arkansas. And then how this storm is being talked about is there's almost two waves of thunderstorms, especially up here in Arkansas. It looks like the first wave has already begun, and it's continuing until about 1 p.m. today. And then you might think you're in the clear at this point because the majority of the thunderstorms have moved off, but then it almost seems like there's a second wave that comes in behind that, but especially down here in the southern and southeastern parts of the state at about 3 p.m. That works into 4 p.m. We're still seeing some of those severe thunderstorms popping up, and then that will finally be moving out of Arkansas by about 11 p.m. tonight. So I think the key story for Arkansas is there's almost two waves of thunderstorms. There's the first one, and then that ends around maybe 1 or 2 o'clock today. But then you can't think that you're in the clear because there's another little blast of supercell thunderstorms following in right behind that. Now, it's a little bit of a different story down here in Louisiana because it's more of just one big strip of thunderstorms that moves over the state. It's a more organized system that you can see has already started. That's about 12 p.m. and then getting into 1 p.m. Wednesday. That's going to be working farther into Louisiana. And then you're just going to see that strip of severe thunderstorms and severe weather, the things associated with that, those extreme wind gusts, the hail, and then possibly some tornadoes. The threat isn't as large down here in Louisiana, but again, that's not saying it can't happen. The reason I paused there is we can actually look at what that tornado threat is there in Louisiana. It looks like about 15% chance of a tornado threat there in northeastern Louisiana. Let's see if I can find that tab again. That was actually pretty fast considering I have about 60 tabs open. So at about 3 p.m., that's where that strip, that organized strip along that cold front of this low pressure system is going to be working through Louisiana 3 to 4 to even 5. So I think the key spot there is looking at the northeastern parts of Louisiana. That's where we had that greatest risk of tornadoes in Louisiana, that 15% chance. And it'll most likely be associated with some of these thunderstorms that appear to be moving into that same area around 4 p.m. into 5 p.m., 6 p.m., and then by about 8 p.m., it looks like for the most part, the severe thunderstorms have moved out of the majority of the state, and then they're just moving through the right arm and then completely out by about 12 a.m. on Thursday. So, different story. While in Arkansas it looked like it was 2 separate waves coming in, for Louisiana it looks like it's just this one organized line of severe weather that moves all the way across the state throughout the entire day today. It doesn't look like it's gone until about 12 a.m. on Thursday. So now we're to what I think is the key place to look at, Mississippi and Alabama. The reason that's, I think, the key place to look at goes back to what we were just looking at right about here, looking at the tornado threat. That's where we have the 30% to 45% chance of tornadoes forming in this area. And then along with those tornadoes, we also have the wind threat, which is also greatest in this area, and then the hail threat as well, which covers Mississippi and Alabama as well. So looking back at the exact timing as this comes through, we're starting to see some scattered showers showing up already. But again, this storm is mostly moving from Texas across the southeast. So it makes sense that the timing is going to be a little bit later here in Mississippi and Alabama. So we do have those scattered showers showing up. And then it looks like the thunderstorms themselves, especially there in the central parts of the state, start to show up at about 2 p.m. on Wednesday. And then you'll notice, especially in the central parts of Mississippi and Alabama, that key spot where we have the greatest risk of winds, hail, and tornadoes, that's where those severe thunderstorms continue and look to be actually strengthening at about 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Now, it's almost a similar story to Arkansas, where there's almost 2 waves of this severe weather. I'd say that first wave looks to be starting about 1 p.m. today, strengthening between 2 and 3 p.m., and then moving off into Alabama by about 5 p.m. But then behind that, we have almost the second wave of this system. That's going to be coming in at about 6 p.m. and 7 p.m., where you start to see those severe thunderstorms, some of those supercells popping back up into Mississippi, basically covering the area that these supercells cover is stretching all the way from the southern parts of the state all the way up into Tennessee. And then I seem to be focusing on Mississippi here, but it's also important to look out for Alabama as well, because we're seeing the exact same kind of probabilities of threats in Alabama as well, and you can see we have those severe thunderstorms showing up in that state as well. So then this is all the way into 9 p.m. into 10 p.m. tonight. You can see those severe thunderstorms still slowly moving across the state and then working directly into Alabama by about 1 a.m. on Thursday. And then at 2 a.m. on Thursday, that could be a key time to watch out, where we get that bullseye of severe thunderstorms directly over the central parts of Alabama. So let's just look at the timing again. Let's go back in time here to the very start. Looks like the first wave starts this afternoon, and then that moves off into Alabama by about 5 p.m. this evening. Then the second wave comes in, where we just get widespread severe weather throughout almost all of Mississippi and Alabama, starting about 5 p.m. tonight, and then lasting all the way until it moves through Alabama, which isn't even till about this time tomorrow. So I would say the key spots to look out for, if I had to pick a key spot, would be that strengthening this afternoon at about 3 p.m., but then even more so as we get into tonight, because for a number of different reasons, nighttime is the most dangerous time for tornadoes. So if you're living in northeastern Louisiana, southeastern Arkansas, all of Mississippi, Alabama, or even parts of Tennessee, I would certainly stay updated with your local resources to identify any of those tornado watches that might be turning into tornado warnings throughout the day today. And then just north of that, associated with the same system, we see this flash flood threat up here in Missouri. So let's just take a quick look at that, see why that threat might be showing up there. So there's that low. As it strengthens, brings that severe weather we're talking about throughout the day today. But it looks like the key thing that it's going to be bringing to Missouri is just a large amount of rainfall. I think I pointed to the wrong place right there. Large amount of rainfall that you can see is associated with those heavy rainfall rates, where we're at about 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour. That's going to be building in throughout the day today and even lasting into Thursday as well. So let's just look at the exact timing. Looks like it already started early this morning. And I think actually the most important thing to think about for Missouri here, where we have this flash flood threat, is we already picked up a large amount of rainfall, especially in the southern parts of the state, from Winter Storm Xylea, which happened over the weekend. So what happens there is your soils can only absorb so much rainfall. So when you continue to pile on more and more rain, your soils become saturated, and then when more rain falls on top of that, it doesn't get absorbed in the soil, it turns into runoff, or what you could also call flash flooding. So what we're going to be seeing in Missouri doesn't actually look like that much rain building in, certainly not to compare to what we've seen throughout other days throughout the season, but I think it's the cumulative effects of piling in that rainfall for a large period of time that is creating this flash flood threat. So think, at this point, a lot of our soils here in the southeastern parts of the state, or southern parts of Missouri, are already saturated, and then at about 7 p.m. tonight, we're going to have these severe thunderstorms pushing through the region, which will be dropping large amounts of rainfall all at the same time. So some of that rainfall is not going to be able to be absorbed. It could turn into flooding. That's why we have the flood warning there. And then the good news is that doesn't seem to be lasting for all too long. By about 7 a.m. on Thursday morning, it looks like we're just into the light rain category, even a little bit of a wintry mix in some parts of the state, and then that's gone by about 7 p.m. on Thursday. So it's a relatively quick storm moving through here. And then looking at the rainfall, this explains what I was trying to say earlier. It's 1 inch to 3 inches of rainfall building into Missouri, which is certainly significant. But with Winter Storm Xylea, the forecast we were doing this last Friday, there was rainfall of 5 to 6 inches building into this region. So again, it's not as big as Winter Storm Xylea might have been in this region, but it's the cumulative effects of adding another 1 inch to 3 inches on top of what we've already received. So again, back on this warnings map, we've talked about the tornado watch down here in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and what I believe they'll be showing this tornado watch later in the day for Alabama as well. Then the flash flood watch up here in Missouri, where we're going to be getting another 1 inch to 3 inches of rainfall on top of the 5 inches we picked up from Winter Storm Xylea. And then you also see this blizzard warning over here in northern Texas. So there's a lot going on in this region, and it's all associated with the same storm. It's creating different things in different regions. And that's basically the theme of this video. So now let's take a look at that blizzard warning right there. So it's associated with this trough as that low pressure system moves across the region. What you notice here is that the isobars get closer together. They actually already are pretty close together over New Mexico right there. That's why we had that wildfire threat yesterday. But then as they move directly over Texas, where those isobars are closest together is where you're going to have an extreme storm. That's where you start to get stronger winds. And then you can also see it's pulling down cold air. So there's a low pressure system. It spins counterclockwise, and it happens to be spinning fast because it's rapidly intensifying and becoming a rather strong low pressure system. So on the left side of that, we're pulling down this cold air. That is what's allowing this blizzard threat to happen, because without that cold air being pulled down, we'd most likely just be getting rain in this region. But as it turns out, this storm is strong enough to be pulling that air down from Colorado. So you can see that snow building into northern parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and even Kansas as well throughout this morning and then working into this afternoon. So this is something that is happening right now, but even though it looks like this is going to be done this afternoon and then by this evening we're just getting wintry mix and rainfall, you have to keep in mind that right now, this afternoon in Texas, we are still getting some snowfall, and then some of that will continue before it turns into this rain and wintry mix by this evening. So what all that snowfall is bringing, we can click through and check out the totals. It's actually a pretty significant amount of snowfall in this region. You can see this bullseye where we're getting 6 to 8 inches of snow, and then widespread area where we're in that 4 to 6 inch range, stretching from northeastern New Mexico into northern parts of Texas, western Oklahoma, and then into Kansas as well. So the key spots to look at there are where we have these bullseyes where we're over 6 to 8 inches of snowfall, because what we're going to be doing and why we have this blizzard warning is we're mixing that 6 to 8 inches of snowfall with extreme wind gusts. You can see working into this afternoon directly where we were seeing that snow build up in the northeastern parts of Texas right here. That's going to be mixing that 6 to 8 inches of snow with 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So that's what creates a blizzard warning. When you drop a large amount of snow and then kick it up with extreme wind gusts, that reduces your visibility and creates a blizzard warning. And you can see that, let's see where that blizzard warning stretches. I wonder if it gets all the way, it almost gets here into Kansas. It looks like it does go into Oklahoma here, and then it almost gets up there into Kansas, which seems to make sense because Kansas was also getting some of this larger snowfall. It's at least over 5 inches, and then you can also see those extreme wind gusts showing up there as well, where it's 45 to 50 miles per hour throughout this afternoon and into this evening. And that's another thing to note is once you've dropped the snow, it doesn't actually, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, because it certainly is more of a blizzard warning if you're still currently dropping snow on top of what you've picked up. But if parts of Kansas here have already picked up 6 inches, when these 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts come in, even if it's no longer snowing, that'll still be able to kick up the snow you've already received. So just looking at the exact timing of this as it comes through, looked at about early this morning, we're just getting possibly some severe thunderstorms moving through Oklahoma, and then we started to see that snow move into northern parts of Texas and western Oklahoma at about 7 a.m. this morning. By about 1 p.m., which is right about now, we see that snow directly over Texas into Oklahoma and then working into Kansas as well. And then by about 7 p.m. tonight, it looks like we're going to be transitioning to more of a rainfall and wintry mix. But again, the key thing to think about there is even though it shows at 1 p.m. we're still in snow, 7 p.m. we're in rain, there's going to be some transition period there. So even though it looks like the snow ends at 1 p.m., it likely could continue into 2 or 3, 4, even 5 before it switches over to rain. So the key thing there is where we're mixing that snowfall with the extreme wind gusts. So clearly the key spot to look at is about 1 p.m. on Wednesday. And at that time, you can see directly where we're getting those heaviest snowfall rates is where we're picking up the most. That's going to be about 6 to 8 inches between northern Texas and Oklahoma, right along the border between those two states there. So then we're going to be mixing all that snowfall, 4 to 8 inches of snow, with these wind gusts that you can see are about 50 to 60, even over 60 miles per hour at some times. So again, that is why we have the blizzard warning. We're dropping what's a rather large amount of snow for this region, and we're mixing it with the 55 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts that should be continuing. Then by about 1 p.m. tonight into about 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, that's where the wind gusts have moved out farther into the southeast. And it'll still be windy in this region, but certainly no longer in the 65 mile per hour gusts like before. So the interesting thing about Texas is in the northern parts of the state, we have that blizzard warning, and then in the southern parts of the state, we have this wildfire warning. It's a red flag warning which means there's a threat for wildfire. And then throughout the entire state, you can see that high wind warning, which again is associated with this low as it moves through. So you can actually understand why this one low pressure system is causing so many different factors. Up here in the northern parts of the state, you can actually see how it's pulling down that cold air from Colorado, where you see that blue color there. That represents below freezing temperatures. You can see by this afternoon, they're going to be working into that exact same spot in northern Texas, working into Oklahoma, where we're still getting the snowfall at this point in time. So in the northern parts of the state, it's bringing down that cold air from Colorado. That's what's allowing this snowfall to form. 2, you can see how strong the wind gusts are here. So that's, again, what's causing those 60 to 65 mile per hour gusts that are causing that blizzard warning. Now, on the flip side, we have a different story going on in the southern part of the state, and it's actually a little bit difficult to explain just looking at the temperature map. Based on the temperature map, you'd think we were bringing that same cold air all the way down from Colorado into the southern parts of the state, which would be helpful when it comes to wildfire warning. Colder air means less risk of wildfire. So that alone doesn't really explain why we have this wildfire threat down in the southern parts of the state. What I think it actually has to do with the moisture that's in the air. We're taking all this dry air that's been over New Mexico for quite a number of days. We had a wildfire threat there yesterday and in western parts of Texas. And because of that circulation around the low, we're taking that dry air and moving it into the southern parts of the state. So where you get dry air, that's where you get dry vegetation, which makes it a lot easier to start a fire. And then once a fire does start, it's a lot easier to spread if all your fuels are dried out. So while the temperatures don't look to be the main cause of this, I believe that dry air is. But, something to note here is it's still certainly warm throughout this region, especially here in the southern parts of the state. We're in the mid 70s to even working into the 80s in some places. So I mainly said that's not the key factor because it's not easily explainable, but you can see that we are still quite warm, especially in the southern part of the state where we have that red flag warning. So out of the 3 key variables, we've already checked off 2. We've got warm temperatures in the mid 70s to even 80s. We've got extremely dry air, what looks to be relative humidity around maybe 5 to 10%. I think if we click, we can actually even see how dry it is. Yeah, about 11% humidity is as dry as you typically are going to see it. And then even western parts of the state look to be in those maybe single digits to teens as well. So we're already checking off 2 of the boxes for wildfire danger: temperature, humidity. The last one to check is wind, and especially wind gusts. And you can see that's a factor in this area as well. If we click in here, we can see wind gusts around 30 to maybe 45 miles per hour throughout those same regions where we have that warm air and that dry air. So what that does, again, dries out the fuels, and with those wind gusts, any little spark that does happen can get spread rapidly by those 40 mile per hour gusts. So again, that's why when we're looking at the fire danger in this area, you can see this orange color, it's very high. And then where we get to that dark red color, that's where there's an extreme threat for fire danger. So that's what's going on. It's very interesting to see that in the northern parts of the state, there's a blizzard warning. In the southern parts of the state, there's a threat for wildfire. But it starts to make sense when you start to break apart all the different factors that this low pressure system is bringing in. On the right side, it's bringing in warm air and moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and that's that warm air and moisture that's necessary to rise up into a thunderstorm and create a tornado. In more northern parts of the southeast, as we get into Missouri, that's where we're just dropping a large amount of rainfall, where there's less of a risk of tornadoes, but that rainfall is causing this flash flood warning. In the left side of this low, that's where we're pulling down cold air and then mixed with those extreme wind gusts, causing this blizzard warning in northern Texas. But then on the southern parts of this low, that's where we're pulling in dry air from New Mexico, creating a wildfire threat. So one low pressure system causing 4 different types of warnings. And it really just depends on where you are actually located, which one you should be focusing on. So that basically sums up what's going on with that low pressure system. I'm not going to get into what happens after it moves farther into the southeast. I'll focus on that in tomorrow morning's forecast. Because what I do want to focus on is what we see showing up here in Northern California. We're seeing the first little traces of a winter storm watch and then even a winter storm warning showing up in Northern California. So we weren't supposed to be getting any more storms. The extended forecast last week was saying we were going to be switching into a dry pattern for the next 2 weeks and what looked like even the next 3 months. So fairly good news, especially if you're like me and mostly concerned about the drought and wildfire danger, that it looks like there is a rather large trough moving in over the next few days and then even continuing into this weekend. Now, I say large trough, but at the end of the day, the isobars themselves look very far apart. So, for example, with that storm we've been talking about for the majority of this video, you can see how close those isobars are together. That's why we have such a major severe weather threat, because that shows how intense that storm is. Over here in the west, when it first comes in, that's going to be the bulk of the storm as it starts to bring some rain and snow. But then as it moves farther over the region, it looks like this storm is going to weaken. So let's actually see what the precipitation is doing as it comes in. You see that rain build into Washington, Oregon, California, and then we start to get some snow in the Sierras. But again, it's not looking like a major storm by any standards, but we weren't supposed to be getting any storm, so in my view, we could take what we can get. So looking at this coming in, it looks like it'll start to show up early Thursday morning where we start to get that rain into California, then some snow building into the northern California mountains, and then working into the Sierras as we get into early Friday morning. Now, one thing to note here, just clicking through that, you'll see that there's not really any points in time. Maybe I'm just a little biased because we've been looking at the major extreme weather that's going on in the southeast right now. But looking at this map as this storm comes in, we're not seeing any periods where the rainfall looks to be in this orange or this yellow color where it's 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour. It looks like it's relatively light rain. And then when it comes to the snowfall, we're not seeing any periods where we're 0.2 to 0.5 inches of snowfall per hour. Looks like it's mostly just light snow. But it's going to be moving rather slowly. It first shows up early Thursday morning, and then we're still getting some light rain and snow all the way into maybe even Sunday morning. We might still be getting the last little traces of rain and snow. So even though it looks like a light storm as it comes through, we're going to be able to pick up totals for such a long period of time that our totals will actually end up being pretty decent, as we'll see in a second. So just looking at the exact timing, looks to first show up at about 5 a.m. on Thursday, where we get that widespread rain throughout Northern California here, and then some of that snow starts to build into the Sierras by about 11 p.m. on Thursday. And then that seems to be continuing and actually starting to strengthen at about 5 p.m. on Friday. I'm actually going to be driving up to the mountains at this exact same time, so I may have to stay updated with this weather forecast to make sure I'm not in this band of ice right there that you see designated with that red color. So just continuing to click through there, you can see after that, I would say that's the bulk of the storm right there at about 5 p.m. Friday. That looks to be the strongest part of the storm we've seen, which is unfortunate because that's exactly where and when I'm going to be driving. So continuing to click through, after that's gone, we're going to have continued light rain and light snow for what looks to be majority of Saturday, and then by about 11 p.m. on Saturday night, it looks like most of Northern California is in the clear. So looking at the rainfall that's coming in, we'll just click all the way through. Don't focus on the mountains here. I'll show the snowfall in a second. We're more interested in the coast and the Bay Area. Looks like the coast could be getting up to an inch of rain with this one. Up here in Santa Rosa, another half inch of rain, which again, it's It's nothing major, but that's one of the key wildfire areas I'm always concerned about, and we weren't supposed to be getting any storm this week, so at least we're getting a half an inch in one of our key drought and wildfire areas. Down here in San Francisco, looks like we're about 0.3 inches of rain. San Jose, about 0.5, maybe a bit more in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Then looking at the snowfall, remember it first shows up here in the very northern parts of California. That's by about Thursday at 5 p.m. We've picked up maybe 6 to 10 inches of snow up there. And then by Saturday, we'll just click all the way through till when the storm's done. Looks like that one bullseye up here in Northern California should be picking up 12 to 16 inches of snow. And then here in the Sierras, looks like we could be getting 12 to 16 inches as well. So that's certainly encouraging. We weren't supposed to be getting a storm this week, and it looks like there's some locations getting an inch of rain, and I'm even more excited about that snowfall coming in because a foot and a half of snow is certainly going to help. And when it comes to things like drought, snowfall is actually even better because it slowly works into your soils and vegetation instead of just quickly running off or evaporating like rainfall does. Now, it is interesting to also look at Southern California here to see if they're going to be getting any of it. Looks like there's maybe some scattered rain throughout parts of Central California until about 5 a.m. Friday, and then it looks like the bulk of the storm starts to move in at 5 a.m. to the central coast and then into the Central Valley as well. And then we start to see some of that rain try to push its way down into Southern California. There might be some periods where areas around Los Angeles, working all the way down into San Diego, might get some scattered light rain, but it's certainly not looking like the bulk of this storm will be moving through Southern California. Just to see that another way, let's see how much rain we're expected to get. Yeah, that basically goes along well with that precipitation rate that we were just looking at around the central coast, where we saw the majority of that rainfall building into the more southern parts of California. Looks like we're about 0.3 inches of rain, and then all the way down here looking into Los Angeles and San Diego, looks like we might be in that 0.05 to 0.1 inches of rain, so you might not even notice it if you're living down there. So that's what's going on in California. We'll have to keep an eye on that storm because it is still a little ways off in the forecast, and I'm certainly going to be keeping an eye on that storm because it appears I'm going to be driving right when and where that storm is the strongest. So guaranteed I'll be looking at that in tomorrow's forecast. But overall, I thought I'd just do a broad overview of everything we've talked about. The big story today is this low pressure system causing the major threat for severe weather throughout the southeast, and especially in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and even parts of Tennessee. As that low intensifies, it's going to move across the region. You can see how widespread these severe thunderstorms are going to be. That's going to be associated with extreme wind gusts up to 40 to 60 miles per hour. If you're in the key spots for that storm, you could be seeing maybe even 80 mile per hour plus wind gusts, along with some hail that at times could be baseball sized. And then we've also seen there are regions, especially in central Mississippi and Alabama, that have that 45% chance for tornado formation. Then on the back end of this system, where we're pulling in that cold air from Colorado, we actually have some snowfall and about 6 to 8 inches of snowfall building into northern parts of Texas and western Oklahoma. And that snowfall is going to be mixed with those same extreme wind gusts in the 50 mile per hour range. And that's what's causing a blizzard warning up in the northern parts of Texas and western Oklahoma. And then on the two other warnings that we were talking about is up here in Missouri, where you start to see that heavy rain build in. That's going to bring in another inch to 3 inches of rainfall, which is creating our flash flood warning there. And then down here in southern Texas, where it's totally dry, or where it's dry, you don't see any precipitation. I pause there because it's also actually dry when it comes to relative humidity, and then it's also still windy. That's what's creating that red flag warning down here in southern Texas and that threat for wildfire. But again, the key story today, the number one thing to follow, especially if you live in this area, is the severe weather threat building, especially through Mississippi and Alabama, because this looks to be one of what could be one of the worst days we see all year when it comes to that severe weather. So just looking at that again, you see this trough right here rapidly intensifying throughout the day today. And then where you see those isobars closest together, that's where we're going to be seeing those extreme wind gusts and some of the severe weather that could be bringing those winds, hail, and unfortunately the possibility for some tornadoes as well. And then that is going to move off. I'll continue to cover that storm in especially tomorrow's forecast, because you can see it's going to be moving up throughout the southeast and maybe up even into the mid-Atlantic as we get into Friday. Then on the back end of that system, behind that one, it looks like we have another trough filling in the western parts of the U.S. That's going to bring some rain and snow to California. Overall, it looks like just a moderate storm, but it's going to be dropping snowfall for such a long period of time that parts of the Sierras could be getting 12 to 16 inches of snow, and then the north coast could be getting an inch of rain as that trough moves through. So just looking at the total rainfall that we're expected to get, I'll just click all the way through and then we'll talk about everything. You can see a lot of that heavy rainfall isolated there in Kansas, Missouri, and then down here in Alabama as well. So right here in Missouri, that's where we got the largest amount of rainfall with Winter Storm Xylea. So I think that's why we have that flash flood threat there, because the soils are already close to saturation. So when we build on another inch to 2 inches, that's where you can start to get the threat for some flash flooding. But then you do also see that heavy rainfall building into Alabama. The reason I didn't talk about that too much today is because I think there's bigger concerns, especially thinking about the winds, the hail, and the possibility of tornadoes. But then over here in the northwest, as that second trough comes in after this low pressure system has gone through the southeast, you can see that's going to bring some widespread rain to the coast, where we could be getting an inch or two all the way down into the coast of Northern California, and then just some light rain building into the Bay Area down into the Central Coast. When it comes to snowfall, the key thing that I see on this map is right here in Texas and Oklahoma. Again, the reason that snowfall is possible is because of that low pressure system we've been talking about all day. The winds are so strong that it's pulling that cold air down from Colorado and allowing that precipitation to fall in the form of snow. And you can see a rather decent amount of snow, especially for this region. Some areas getting 6 to 8 inches. And again, that's going to be being mixed with 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts, which is why we have that blizzard warning. Then in the west, the snowfall is more of good news. Instead of causing a blizzard warning, it'll most likely just be helping us out with the drought and future wildfire danger, where we have a foot to a foot and a half building in through the mountains in Northern California and throughout the Sierras. But you can also see parts of the Cascades getting maybe 6 inches with that storm as well. Didn't focus too much there, just because there is a lot of other stuff to talk about today. So I'll show this again. Hopefully you can see this. It doesn't look like it's formatted perfectly for where it should be on the screen. So this, I think, is the key graphic to show today. If you missed everything else in the video, this basically sums up the top story and the most important thing to recognize for today. We have this high chance of severe weather in southeast Arkansas, northeast Louisiana, almost all of central Mississippi, and central Alabama as well. That's where there's that high risk of severe weather, which isn't something you see very often. I believe I'm saying this right, but I think this only happens 1 to 3 times per year. So this is certainly one of those events that we need to be taking seriously. So that's the overall chances for severe weather when it comes to the tornadoes. You can see in that same area throughout southeast Arkansas, northeast Louisiana, central Mississippi, and Alabama, we have that 30% chance of tornadoes, and then that bullseye between Mississippi and Alabama where there's 45% chance of tornadoes. The other part of that severe weather is the winds, where we saw at times there were gusts getting all the way up into 60 miles per hour. But if you're in the strongest part of some of these severe thunderstorms, that's where your gusts can get over 80 miles per hour. And then, unfortunately, if a tornado forms, that's where your gusts can get over 100 miles per hour. And then if we look at the hail, that's another factor. We have this bullseye right in that same region again, where there's a 30% chance of large hail. We saw in that one forecast graphic that some hail could be expected to be about the size of baseballs. So that's, I think, the most important thing to focus on there, and basically sums up some of those tornado watches that we have throughout this area. Again, we have the flash flood watches throughout Missouri, the blizzard warning up here in northern Texas and western Oklahoma, the red flag warning and the wildfire threat down here in southern Texas, and then the winter storm on the horizon for northern California. So again, I think the most important thing to focus on here is if you're living in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, this is one of those days where it's very important to stay updated with all your local resources. My purpose is more just to get some broad general news out there, and then when it comes to actually taking these warnings seriously and the timing, that's where you want to go to your local meteorologist, because they're going to be able to give you a much better fine-tuned forecast for your actual needs. So I hope this video is helpful. My thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who might be affected by this severe weather today, and I hope you all have a great day, and thanks for watching.